The rain had stopped, but the sky over Fairview still hung low and gray, pressing down on the rows of umbrellas gathered around Edward Langford's grave. The sound of earth hitting the coffin echoed like a slow heartbeat. I stood there numb, my gloved hands wrapped around the handle of an umbrella I barely felt. After 50 years of marriage, there were no more words left between us, just silence and the weight of all the things we never said. People came to me one by one, offering their rehearsed condolences, voices blurring together into a single dull hum. My daughter Karen stayed close, her hand resting on my shoulder as if afraid I might crumble under the grief. When the last prayer ended, I turned to leave. That was when it happened. A faint vibration came from my purse. I froze. It was Edward's phone. I had tucked it there earlier, planning to return it to his lawyer after the burial. The sound seemed out of place among the quiet sobs and whispers of the crowd. I hesitated before pulling it out. The message on the screen made my breath catch. Don't look at the coffin. Look behind you. The words blurred for a second before they settled into clarity. My pulse pounded in my ears. Slowly, I turned. Across the cemetery at the edge of the trees, a man stood under a black umbrella. His face was leaner, older, but I would have known him anywhere. My son, Daniel. He looked straight at me, raised one finger to his lips, and shook his head. Then he turned and disappeared behind the line of gravestones, swallowed by the rain. Karen's voice broke through the silence. "Mom, are you all right?" I couldn't answer. Edward's phone slipped from my hand and landed softly on the wet grass. For 5 years, the world had believed my son was gone, lost, guilty, condemned. But as I stared into the mist where he had stood, one thought wouldn't leave me. Edward knew. He must have known all along. After the funeral, the house felt like a museum of things I couldn't touch. Edward's jacket still hung by the door, his slippers by the hearth, his books stacked neatly beside his chair. I wandered through the rooms like a stranger in someone else's life, half expecting to hear his cough, his footsteps, his voice. When night came, I couldn't sleep. I sat at his desk, staring at the screen of his phone, trying to make sense of that message. My heart still pounded with the image of Daniel's face. Was it really him? Or had grief finally cracked something inside me? I opened Edward's calendar, hoping for a clue. That's when I noticed that the same entry repeated every month for the last 5 years. Maintenance, barn. Our barn had been empty since the early 90s. The roof sagged, the doors warped, and Edward hadn't been strong enough to walk that far in years. What could he have been maintaining there? By midnight, the question had become unbearable. The wind cut through the yard as I made my way toward the barn, flashlight trembling in my hand. The moonlight hit something metallic, a new padlock gleaming against the old wood. My breath caught. Edward hadn't been maintaining anything. He'd been hiding something. I ran back to the garage for his toolbox and returned, the sound of the lock snapping echoing through the stillness. Inside, the air was thick with dust and oil. My flashlight swept across the floor until it landed on a single cardboard box covered with a tarp. On top, in Edward's careful handwriting, with 3 words: Evidence, Daniel's case. My hands shook as I opened it. Files, photographs, printed emails, everything organized, labeled, deliberate. And on the first page of his notebook, written in ink that bled slightly at the edges, were words that made my knees weaken. If you're reading this, Sylvia, I ran out of time. Our son didn't steal a thing. The flashlight flickered, and in that thin beam of light, I realized Edward had never stopped fighting. Even in death, he was still trying to protect the truth. The sound of tires crunching gravel made me freeze. I turned off the flashlight and held my breath. Through the cracks in the barn wall, headlights swept across the yard, cutting through the mist. A door opened. Footsteps. Then a voice I hadn't heard in 5 long years. "Mom, it's me." For a second, the world went silent. The flashlight slipped from my fingers and rolled across the floor. When I turned, Daniel stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, his face gaunt, but his eyes sharp and alive. I wanted to run to him, but my legs wouldn't move. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered. "I didn't have a choice," he said. "They're watching the house." I waited until the lights went out. I took a step closer. "Why now, Daniel? After all this time?" He glanced around the barn, eyes landing on the open box. "Because Dad's dead, and if he's gone, they'll come for you next." He told me everything, how he discovered that Caldwell Infrastructure had been laundering money through false accounts using his signature. When he confronted their CEO, David Brainerd, they threatened his wife and daughter. Dad believed me, he said. He started gathering proof, but they found out. He was the only one who could expose them. I felt the weight of his words settle like a stone in my chest. You think they killed him? I know they did, Daniel said. Catherine Lee, Dad's lawyer, told me his prescription was changed 2 weeks before he died. The dosage doubled. It wasn't an accident. The rain outside turned heavier, a low rumble of thunder rolling across the hills. I stared at my son, seeing the fear that had replaced the arrogance people once accused him of. He wasn't running anymore. He was surviving. Dad said you'd find this, he said, pointing to the box. He wanted the truth to come from you. Tears burned behind my eyes. I reached out, my hand trembling as it touched his arm. Then we finish what he started. He nodded. But we have to move fast. They know he kept files here. If they think you have them, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Outside, an engine started again, and I knew someone else was watching. The next morning, the house looked the same, but it no longer felt like mine. Every sound made me flinch. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, the rumble of a car outside. Daniel had slipped away before dawn, promising to contact me when it was safe. He left a note on the kitchen table that read simply, "Trust no one." By 10 o'clock, there was a knock at the front door. Through the window, I saw a man in a dark suit holding a badge. He looked calm, professional, official. When I opened the door, he gave a practiced smile. "Mrs. Langford, I'm Special Agent Mark Weber, FBI. We're following up on an open case regarding your son." The badge looked real, but something about him didn't fit. His eyes never stayed still. They scanned the room behind me as if searching for something. I forced myself to speak evenly. "I haven't seen Daniel in years." He nodded, pulling out a small notebook. "If he contacts you, you need to tell us immediately. He's considered dangerous." "Dangerous?" I repeated, trying to sound surprised. "Yes, ma'am. For your safety, you shouldn't go anywhere alone." He handed me a card. "You can call me anytime." He left as politely as he'd arrived, but I watched his black sedan linger at the corner for several minutes before driving away. My hands were still trembling when another knock came, quieter, urgent. A woman stood on the porch, raincoat dripping, eyes darting nervously. "Miss Langford, my name's Catherine Lee. I was your husband's attorney." Her voice dropped. "That man who just left, he's not FBI. He works for Caldwell. They know Edward was investigating them. They think you have his files." Before I could reply, glass shattered in the kitchen. Bullets tore through the window, splintering the cabinets. Catherine grabbed my arm. "Run!" We raced through the back door, the sound of gunfire following us into the rain. She didn't look back, and neither did I. That was the moment I understood. Edward's war had become mine. I didn't remember how long we ran. The world blurred into rain and headlights and fear. Catherine led me through the trees, down an embankment, and into a narrow tunnel near the creek. The air smelled of dirt and rust. We crouched in silence until the sound of engines faded. When we finally emerged, we were miles from home. Catherine handed me a small flip phone and a folded note. "If they find me," she said, her breath unsteady, "call this number. It belongs to someone who can finish what Edward started." Before I could ask who, a single gunshot cracked through the trees. Catherine gasped, her knees buckling. I caught her before she hit the ground. Blood bloomed across her shoulder. She pressed the phone into my hand, whispering, "Run!" Her voice was barely a breath. "Jessica McKenna, journalist." Then she went still. I ran. By dawn, the news broke. Elderly widow wanted for murder of local attorney. My photo was everywhere. They said I'd gone mad after my husband's death, that I'd killed his lawyer and fled. My daughter Karen appeared on television, eyes red, begging me to surrender. The betrayal stung worse and worthier. I hid in the basement of Grace Lutheran Church, a small brick building at the edge of town. Reverend Ellis Holloway, a man in his 70s with kind eyes, didn't ask questions. "You look like someone with truth to tell," he said. "Truth always has a place here." For 2 nights, I stayed hidden beneath the church, the world outside spinning stories about me that weren't true. On the 3rd night, I used the phone Catherine had given me. The voice that answered was calm, clear, and precise. "This is Jessica McKenna." I hesitated. "Catherine Lee gave me your name before she died." A pause. Then, "Mrs. Langford, I know who you are. I know about Caldwell. If you have what I think you do, we need to meet somewhere public." "Where?" I asked. "Shenley Park," she said. "By the fountain. Tomorrow morning." The call ended. For the first time since Edward's funeral, I had something I hadn't dared to feel. A plan. The next morning, Shenley Park was wrapped in fog, the kind that made everything look softer but feel more dangerous. I arrived early, wearing a scarf and sunglasses, clutching the bag that held Edward's laptop. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Jessica McKenna appeared right on time.
Mid-30s, sharp features, confident but cautious. She walked with purpose, scanning the area before sitting beside me on a bench. "You brought it?" she asked quietly. I nodded and handed her the laptop. Everything Edward found is there. Transfers, emails, photos. He was trying to clear Daniel's name. Jessica opened it, scrolling through the files. Her eyes widened. "My God, this isn't just one company. These records connect Caldwell CEO David Brainerd to half the county government." She looked up. "If this is real, you're sitting on the biggest corruption case in Pennsylvania in 20 years. Before I could respond, a man in a dark jacket passed us twice. His pace too slow, his glance too deliberate. Jessica's voice lowered. "We're being watched." We split up. She took the laptop, promising to meet me later. I slipped into the park restroom, locking the stall door. My heart hammered so loudly I could barely hear the footsteps outside. A voice called my name, once, then again, closer. I stood on the toilet seat, trying not to breathe.